An American university student was found dead in her home. Once the police began their investigation, they discovered several disturbing facts. Before them were 3 versions of what happened at once, and each of them was more terrible than the other. Only 2 years later, they finally managed to find out the truth, although they had to pay for it in blood. Brooke Baker was born in the small American town of Vincennes, Indiana. While still in school, she began to become interested in journalism, worked for a local newspaper, and planned to connect her future life with this profession. She had every chance to achieve some success in this direction. The girl was very sociable, had many friends, and showed a keen interest in any topic that came her way. In August 1996, Brooke was admitted to Vincennes University, the oldest in Indiana. Founded in 1800 and 1.19-year-old Brooke moved to live on campus and spent a lot of time writing articles for the student newspaper. The girl wanted to talk about fraternities. They had great power at the university, but the reputation of these organizations was dubious. Brooke learned about the rape and cover-up of the crime that occurred in one of the fraternities. Several of Brooke's friends were members of this community, but they did not want to discuss this story. The victim initially agreed to talk to Brooke, but then refused because members put pressure on her. In July 1997, Brooke moved into an off-campus apartment. She did this partly out of constant concern from her parents. They were aware of the topic Brooke was working on, and also knew about the threats against her. 2 weeks have passed since then. She continued to work on her investigation, and at least she felt safe at home. On Sunday, July 7, 1997, Brooke's brother entered her apartment using a spare key. Water was flowing in the bathroom. The young man turned off the tap and headed to his sister's bedroom. The girl was lying on the bed without clothes. From the very first minutes, it was clear to the investigators that they were faced with a murder. This was evidenced by the amount of blood throughout the house and multiple signs of a struggle. The police also noticed something strange. The bathtub was filled to the top, and the faucet was open. Apparently, the criminal tried to wash everything he touched. There was a bottle of bleach and 2 empty bottles of dishwashing liquid in the bathtub. They found a knife in the kitchen sink that had been thoroughly washed with detergent. Because of this, the police were unable to find fingerprints or DNA evidence of the killer in the house. Moreover, there were no signs of forced entry. This meant that the girl either let the criminal in or left the door unlocked. After examining Brooke's body, medical experts confirmed that she died as a result of the attack. An unknown perpetrator inflicted 11 stab wounds on her and also subjected her to violence. Experts were able to extract a DNA sample from an unknown man from her body, which was immediately checked against all available databases. Unfortunately, there were no matches. This indicated that before Brooke's murder, he had never been caught by the police for any crime. Police began searching for witnesses who might have seen who came to Brooke's house on the day of the murder. Here they also failed. The neighbors did not see any suspicious people, cars, or anything else. As a result, due to the lack of any evidence, detectives had to work almost blindly. Brother Brooke was in shock and was unable to calm down immediately. He told police that his sister had met her boyfriend at a party the day before. Soon Brooke left, but he stayed. The police were unable to confirm his alibi because he and his friends had drunk a lot and had little memory of what happened that evening. After speaking with the victim's friends and family, they learned of threats against her from members of a university fraternity. Given that Brooke wanted to publicize a possible case of violence against girls, the police immediately began to look closely at these students as suspects. They were questioned, and DNA samples were taken, none of which ultimately showed a match. Whoever attacked Brooke that evening was definitely not one of the fraternity members. However, the police did not rule out that they could involve someone from the outside in this terrible case. But the version about the involvement of the Brotherhood did not add up in some ways. The killer entered the house through an open door because there were no signs of forced entry. Brooke's acquaintances said that she never left the door open, especially amid threats against her. which means she either knew her killer and let him in, or he somehow convinced the girl to let him inside. When Brooke's friends and family learned that fraternity involvement seemed unlikely to police, they shared another disturbing fact. After moving into rented housing, the girl repeatedly complained about the landlord, who behaved frankly strangely. The man worked as a campus police officer. He often came to her house without warning or permission, opening the door with his keys. Several such incidents made Brooke seriously think about her own safety. The homeowner came to her at night while she was sleeping, went into her room, and turned on the light. Another time he came into the house while the girl was taking a shower. Each time he explained this by saying that he urgently needed to take some things from the house. Of course, Brooke didn't believe this and began to fear the man. The law strictly prohibits a landlord from entering a tenant's home without his permission, and the consequences can be very serious. It would seem that the campus police officer should be well aware of this, but he continued to come to the house under various pretexts. Given that he had a personal set of keys, he could have opened the door at any time without any signs of forced entry. Having learned about this, the city police visited him with questions. The man declared his innocence and provided a DNA sample, which also did not match the one found on the girl's body. No other evidence of his involvement could be found. After checking, his alibi was confirmed. The man was at work, and the detectives were again left empty-handed. Brooke's classmates said fraternity members constantly threatened her. Investigators interviewed the girl's fraternity friends and other members. Every day there were more and more suspects. The police returned to the fraternity and took DNA from 65 people, but this did not bring any results. The matter has reached a dead end. Almost 2 years passed before there was a breakthrough in this case. On July 5, 1999, the police received a report of the disappearance of a student at the same university named Erica Norman. The police arrived at her house, where a terrible sight awaited them. There were traces of blood on the floor and walls, but then they noticed something truly disturbing. The bathroom was filled to the top, and the tap was on. A sofa cushion was floating in the water. The girl herself was nowhere to be found. Detectives quickly realized that it was highly likely that the same person who had killed Brooke 2 years earlier was involved in this crime. And now they have a new chance to catch this maniac in hot pursuit. The girl's body was not found. The police found out that Erica was in a bar with a 22-year-old man named Brian Jones that night. In 1997, he was friends with Brooke. It turned out that his DNA had not been tested. He left town immediately after Brooke's death and did not return until 1999. During interrogation, Brian was accommodating and admitted that after the bar he went to Erica's apartment. They watched a movie together, and when the girl fell asleep, he left. The man allowed the police to search his car, home, and provided a DNA sample. Detectives studied his biography and found out that he had never been charged with any violations. This willing cooperation led them to believe that he was unlikely to be involved in the murder. Unfortunately, the expert was unable to find any traces of DNA or fingerprints at the scene of Erica's murder, but a DNA sample from Brooke's body was still in the laboratory. After comparing it with Brian's sample, experts established a 100% match. Immediately after this, Brian was arrested and interrogated, but he denied his guilt. A week later, Erica's body was found in a cornfield in Illinois. After his arrest, Brian stopped cooperating with the police. Investigators believe Brooke rejected him after the party when he came to her home. Brian would most likely be found guilty and could receive a death sentence. Apparently, he was frightened by this prospect, and he decided to confess to the murder of Erica Norman. He eventually pleaded guilty to Erica's murder and stood trial for Brooke's murder. The trial went fairly quickly, and the judge sentenced Brian to 60 years in prison for Erica's murder. Next came the trial of Brooke Baker. Brian's lawyer failed to achieve a miracle, and in December 2000 the court found him guilty of the murder of Brooke Baker. For this he received a life sentence, plus 20 years for violent acts. Despite all this, he still has the right to apply for early release in 2030. That is, after 30 years of imprisonment. Considering that Brian was only 24 years old at the time of his sentencing, he has hope of being released at 54 years old. True, there is little chance of this. Usually such monsters are denied all requests for release.